Hi, romance readers. I am Liz Donatelli. Welcome to Reader Seeks Romance, the #1 romance novel talk show on YouTube. Author Jeannie Chin joins me to discuss her contemporary small-town romance, The House on Mulberry Street. And Jeannie plays Would You Rather? Small-Town Romance Reader Edition. Enjoy, and be sure to like and subscribe. Welcome to Reader Seeks Romance, Jeannie.
Thank you so much for having me.
Congratulations on the release of The House on Mulberry Street, Book 3 in your Blue Cedar Falls series.
Thank you so much. It's so exciting to have it out in the world.
I'd like to start off with some praise. A good way to begin. It's all
I
good.
wore my embarrassment cowl, so if I start feeling the warm cheeks, I have my defense mechanism.
Okay, all right, good. Get it ready. The House on Mulberry Street, no joke, has the most 5-star reviews on Goodreads of any romance that I have recently read. I was really impressed by that because Goodreads, it can be tough. The readers can be very tough. Now, here are some excerpts from some of these 5-star reviews that I would like to share. I have been waiting to read Elizabeth's story for a while, and it did not disappoint. This was such a delightful book to read because I could so relate. The House on Mulberry Street is one of the best, most poignant small-town romances I've read in a long time. And I did notice that you did get a blurb from Christina Lauren citing you as a must-read voice in romance. So after hearing all of that, would you say that your author goals are now all achieved?
Retire, I'm done, I'm good. Yep, we're all set. That is very flattering. I've been low-key avoiding the reviews just because I'm flustered easily, but that is so incredibly flattering to hear. Thank you.
In The House on Mulberry Street, your romance protagonists are longtime best friends Elizabeth and Graham. What makes Elizabeth and Graham right for each other? And what roadblocks do they encounter along their friends to lovers journey?
They are a total opposites attract odd couple. Elizabeth is flighty and very creative and very fun, while Graham is Mr. Steady, Mr. Dependable. And I really think it's their own sort of preconceived notions about themselves that are the biggest obstacle to them getting together. But the fact that they complement each other so well is why they're perfect for each other. So the fact that Elizabeth thinks she's too flighty for Graham is part of why she doesn't really trust their relationship at the beginning. And Graham thinking he's too boring for her is also why he can't really trust that she has feelings for him. So it's the fact that they're opposites makes them perfect for each other, and the fact that they're opposites makes them both feel like it's impossible. And that was a really fun kind of conflict to write.
I've read a lot of friends to romance stories, and I feel like your work really explored the real life roadblocks to that.
I think that the fact that they are such good friends then also gives you a bunch of the stakes for why it has to be right. Yes. If neither of them trust the relationship, they already have such a wonderful relationship as friends that they're both so terrified to risk that it takes them a while to really be willing to wade in as deeply as they need to be true romantic partners in life. Because they're so worried about messing up what they already have.
And honestly, if I knew two people who were good friends and I knew that they secretly really wanted more from each other, I would give them The House on Mulberry Street to read, because I think that would help them through the process and be like, either way, even if they don't decide to take the risk, I want them to be well informed. And this book would do that.
That would be an honor. I will give you my confession. This is the closest to my real life marriage as I have ever written in my entire life.
Really?
There are many, many, many differences. It's loosely inspired. But my husband and I actually are opposites, and I was an art major in college and really thought that I just couldn't get my act together, and I was disorganized. But I mean, like I said, this room is a mess. Everything you can't see to every possible other edge is a disaster. And he was like the guy with the dorm room that was everything in its place, immaculate at all times. And I'm like, oh, we could never. We're best friends, but we could never. And meanwhile, he was like, what are you talking about? I mean, you're fun. You're cool to hang out with. And I'm like, no, I'm flighty and weird. And he thought, oh, I'm boring. She would rather be with someone more like her. So
So I wonder if that's what has been resonating with readers and even with me is like, oh, like it feels real. It feels like this an authentic conflict and struggle. And I could see these people out in real life. And I think that's not something you find all the time in romance novels. You're like, oh, I would never find these two people out there with this type of relationship. But this just totally like made sense. So
Cool.
you could have been drawing a little either unconsciously or consciously on, yeah, real happenings.
Right. I mean, very, very heavily modified from real life. Very, but
Okay.
with some inspiration.
Right. Wow. Oh, I love that. World building is an integral part of small town fiction, whether it's romance or mystery. Is Blue Cedar Falls based on a real life town? And how did you decide which characters get to live in Blue Cedar Falls when you're thinking up the cast of supporting characters?
Oh, that is such an interesting question. It is not based on a real life town. I used to live in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I love to go visit the mountains out in Lake Asheville.
Mhm.
And I had a friend who had a cabin out on Grandfather Mountain, so we spent some time there. So I'd say like scenically, it's sort of built in that area. And then it takes a little bit of inspiration from, I grew up in upstate New York in a little town that I guess maybe some of the dynamics maybe have some inspiration from there, but overall it's an invented fiction. I would say that building the cast, it was really fun having 3 books to be able to build it and to explore it, because there was a certain element of like seating in a character here who you needed for something to happen in book 1 and seeing another character who was going to be important for book 2, but then they really got to breathe and get some life into them, especially when I was able to book 1, there's a couple of the characters from that who really come back in book 3. They were
Yeah.
a little bit less present in book 2, but they got to make a big comeback. I've got a cranky old lady who has an ongoing feud with sort of like the pearl clutching captain of the PTA, and writing their feud in book 1 and then getting to revisit it in book 3 was really fun to give them guys some more life.
How did you craft Patty? So Patty is the antagonist.
Mm-hmm.
The things that Patty says really upset me in the way she, treats Elizabeth. Did you take pleasure in writing a villain like Patty, or were you exercising your own demons because you once knew a Patty?
There's no direct inspiration for her, but I think we've all met a Patty. I guess she's a Karen, but you know what I mean. We've all met that person who just is trying to ruin everybody else's life because she wants things her way. It was sort of fun to craft her like little sharp lines, and it was a lot of fun to have the other characters navigate around her. But it was also fun trying to breathe some life into her and make her not just a cackling villain. Like I'll be open to any reader's interpretations, but I sort of enjoyed, I feel like toward the end of book 3, like she kind of, we don't redeem her or anything like that, but we sort of get to see her more human side where she's not just actively evil. So that was sort of fun too, to figure out how to soften her and make her a real person in addition to being someone you love to hate.
So I would describe the heat level of your small town romances as sexy, which most readers don't typically associate with a small town romance. I've also actually read some steamy small town romances by Roan Parrish. So are sexier and steamier small town romances on the rise, or are there a slew of them out there that I just have been missing?
I think it's not super common, but I think that there is, I hope there is an audience for it. And I think there are some folks who are out there writing it. I received a really lovely compliment from a reviewer at some point who said that they have a sex life, but it's just part of their life. It's not like it's gratuitous. It's not as if you're sitting there reading a smutty scene and I love smutty scenes. Like I'm not gonna, no shade of any kind being thrown, but it's not a smutty scene to be smutty. It's a healthy, normal part of their lives. And I enjoy seeing that in romantic relationships. And I would love to, let's start the trend right here. I would love to see a little bit more heat in small towns. I think it's fun.
Now, being the House on Mulberry Street is book 3. So if you've written 3 novels and then there was a novella, is this the end of Blue Cedar Falls series and you're moving on to another, or are there more books, more stories to be told?
As of right now, this is probably the end of this series. If something happened and there was, an outcry, of course, I would be very open to writing more in it. But, I set out to tell the story of these 3 sisters who live in this very middle America sort of a town, and I'm really excited with where it ended up. But yeah, I think we're probably moving on to something else next time.
Okay. And you're going to keep the whole sexy trend going, like small
I mean,
town sexy?
that would be my ideal world,
Yes.
absolutely.
Yes. I think you should do that. Writing conflict is your romance writing superpower. I have declared it so. I just want you to know. So the conflict in the house on Mulberry Street is real and relatable. The conflict between Elizabeth and Graham, between Elizabeth and herself, between Graham and himself, between Elizabeth and her family, between Graham and his family. So, and this was also the thing that I enjoyed about the Inn on Sweetbriar Lane. So, to what do you owe the ability to write such believable, organic conflict, as well as great third act breakups, which is hard to do? A lot of the third act breakups, you're like, what? That's what they broke up. Like, your third act breakups are deserved. Like, they make sense.
Thank you so much. Oh my goodness. Like I'm gonna need my like embarrassment cowl. I actually think it's really funny that you said conflict is my superpower. I'd actually heard this from a friend of mine once who said that like I'm tangenting, but I'm going to make sense. If you're going to like teach a class, you should teach a class on something that you struggled with, because that means you had to learn how to do it. Whereas if it's something that you just sort of naturally were able to do, then you can't teach it. And I am the most conflict avoidant person you have ever met in your entire life. If I get into a fight with someone, I will move towns before I will like resolve that argument. I'm in real life, that's not my jam. So I feel like it's something I had to work on.
Yeah.
And so the fact that it was believable and relatable, I think is wonderful. I'm very, very flattered to hear that. I would like to believe that the reason why it comes across as authentic is that it's all character driven. For me, I think the most important part about developing romance novels is developing fully rounded characters with flaws and hopes and dreams and strengths, and often strengths that they don't know that they have. So I think when you start with character and with characters who have inherent issues to begin with, then making the conflict believable is almost, I don't want to say it's done for you, but you've laid the seeds already when you start with character. You don't have to invent it or throw it in a way that doesn't feel organic to the characters when it starts with the characters. And as far as third act breakups, I am in love with the angstiest angst you can possibly find. I have playlists on my computer that are called like Death and Despair and Angsty Mixed Angsterson. Like I love the feels, and I love putting on like the All Too Well from the 10-minute version by Taylor and just like crying my little heart out. Like that's my idea of a good time. The conflict is hard. The angst and the crying to Taylor Swift, that comes easy. That I love.
Wow. I would not have expected that answer from you. I'm glad I asked. I feel like we've gotten to a new level here. What is the first romance novel that you ever read, Jeannie?
My mom was the sort of raw burning feminist of the 70s. Mm-hmm. Like she was that lady, and she was anti-romance novel. She was anti anything. She thought it was, she still kind of, let's be honest, thinks that it's not literature, which is fine. That's fine. We made our peace. So I came to romance super late. Like I was not the one who was like borrowing my mom's romance novels. Mm-hmm. Like I was sitting around in my mid-20s being like, romance novels, what a bunch of nonsense. And then I got turned on to them by a friend, and the first book that I read was the first book in J.R. Ward's Black Dagger Brotherhood series, which is a heck of a place to start.
Wow. I was just going to say, what an education on romance.
Right? Like, and I'm like, what is happening in this book? And so then I haven't turned back around since.
Wow. Now, did you ever entertain writing paranormal romance because of your initial experience with J.R. Ward? Was that something that you thought of, or did you always know, okay, I'm going to do small town romance?
I never really considered doing paranormal, although I enjoy the world building of a small town, but the world building of magical creatures, and most paranormal romances are so plot driven. And I mean, I enjoy some plot. But again, I really like to write more character-driven romances. So I really enjoy reading the worlds that paranormal authors write, but that's just not where my brain starts, I guess, even though I really enjoy reading them. So So maybe someday.
So what is next then? Do you have anything that you're currently writing?
I always have a few things in the fire. I guess I am taking a little bit of a break right now. I am one of those people who like pandemic burned out super hard, have no regrets of any kind, but I was the person who signed a 3-book contract in March of 2020. And while again, no regrets. If I were to give someone advice, it would be not to sign a book contract like 10 seconds before the world shuts down and you lose daycare for months on end. And let me tell you, writing sexy romance with a 3-year-old is not a thing.
Yeah.
So I'm really looking forward to digging back in. I've got a whole bunch of ideas percolating, but there was a certain element of turning this last book in and being like, okay, I'm going to sit down for a minute.
Yeah, I don't blame you. Well, I do hope that a character named Liz Donatelli appears in a future novel.
Well, I mean, she would have no possible option to be anything except a super, super cool character.
Oh, so that is the correct answer. Would you rather read a small town romance between childhood friends to lovers with an only one sleeping bag scene, or a trapped by a hurricane in a basement scene?
How do you choose between those two? I'm going to go with trapped in a hurricane because I absolutely love the ones where like, this probably is the wrong way to say it, but like, I love no escape. Like they have a fight or something like that and like, there's nowhere to go. Like you have to stay in that room and sort it out. And you know, once you got to sort it out, like you got to sort it out. So
you got to sort it out all the way.
That's a tough one.
It is a tough one. There's a couple other tough ones coming up. Would you rather read a small town monster romance with a cinnamon roll gargoyle or a grumpy orc?
Oh my goodness. These are not options I have ever considered in my entire life.
I know. Well, maybe it's food for thought for the future.
Maybe it is. I am a sucker for a cinnamon roll. And so if we could put a cinnamon roll in a gargoyle, I would read the heck out of that.
Okay. I like that.
I like grumpy too, but cinnamon roll under a gargoyle exterior. Now that's, you got something there.
Okay. Well, if you were to put that together, a cinnamon roll gargoyle, and you're trapped, not you,
a cinnamon
per se,
roll gargoyle meets
in
an amazing person named Liz Donatelli in a basement during a hurricane, but they've been best friends forever. So
I love where this is going.
Best friend, the cinnamon roll gargoyle, in the basement during a hurricane.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, well, the next question might answer a bit of the plot for that story. Would you rather read a small town romance with a let's save our family's Italian cannoli shop plot, or a let's save our town's gazebo by producing a musical plot?
You've picked two of my weaknesses, cannolis and musicals.
Really? See?
Absolutely.
I'm intuitive.
You really are. You know, I'm a sucker for both of them, but I'm going to go with the musical because that would just be so much fun to write.
Okay. So is this cinnamon roll gargoyle? The gargoyle is well versed in musical theater?
Well, of course. I mean, it's got a little bit like Hunchback of Notre Dame, like kind of vibes going on.
Oh, I love that. Okay, let's see. Okay, so now the next one. Would you rather read about romance protagonists living in Goshen, New York, who both own squirrel monkeys or piglets?
That is incredibly specific.
I know. I don't know why I felt the need to specify Goshen, New York, but I did.
Very, very specific. I'm going to go with piglets.
I love pigs, so I'm glad you chose
so
them.
Cute.
Okay, so that means that Liz Donatelli and the gargoyle both own piglets as well. Okay.
Yes, of course.
Okay.
But they're sheltering in place in the barn during the hurricane, just so we're clear.
Okay, that's fine. Important. We can make that change. That's fine. Okay.
That's one thing that I love about writing books with like animals in them is that somebody always asks like, what happened to the animal? Like if you got like a pet dog or something like that, you got to make sure that they're like cared for over there somewhere, like when they're off doing something else. Like it's very important. So the pigs must be accounted for.
The pigs. Okay. Got it. Okay. This is the last one. Would you rather read a small town romance in which the locals are largely employed by a living history museum Think like Colonial Williamsburg, or by a drive-in theater.
Again, you keep coming up with these amazing ideas. I think I'd go with drive-in theater, but it's
Okay.
a tough one. But I'm envisioning like the scenes where they have to, be hanging out like while the movie's going on.
Yeah.
And so there's something going on with the movie playing, but they're having their deep, intimate conversations in between helping vendors with popcorn. Like that just feels like
that feels right.
yeah.
That would kind of tie into the musical that the Gargoyle and Liz Donatelli come up with. They could perform it in front of the screen for the theater. Like, I don't know. They perform it at the drive-in theater somehow. I don't know.
No, the grand gesture involves them like playing some footage from the rehearsal that shows how much they love each other. This writes itself.
So now that we've done this, I didn't expect this to become an actual idea for a romance novel. What would you call this? Like, is there a title that we could go with? Like, maybe it should be just called Would You Rather?
I think that pretty much sums it up.
Well, it looks like we've had all the fun we could possibly have.
I can't imagine more.
Thank you so much, Jeannie, for making time to join me here on Reader Seeks Romance. This was a ton of fun.
This was such a pleasure. Thank you.